You have no idea how this story ended for me and for them, so I recommend watching to the end. The mug was warm in my hands when the front door opened and a man stepped in like he owned the room. 5 minutes earlier, she'd invited me in for coffee. 5 minutes later, her past walked in without knocking. Eyes fixed on me as if I were furniture to be moved. I didn't stand up. I waited to see who would speak first. Me or trouble. My name is Ethan Wright. I'm 45, divorced, steady on paper. Operations manager at a warehouse outside town. Early runs, neat kitchen, bills paid on time. After the divorce, I made routines my religion. Laundry on Sundays, lists on the fridge, a quiet house that never argued back. I live 2 doors down from Sophie Ellis, the new neighbor with the kind of smile that lands softly and stays. She's 37, quick, dry-witted, a brunette bob and glasses that make you think of questions she's already solved. Today it rained, the kind of rain that rinses a street clean. Power flickered. The air smelled like wet iron, and I found Sophie Ellis on her porch wrestling a grocery bag. I helped without asking. She laughed. The knot gave and said, "Stay for coffee. I owe you." It was careful, like she was testing a bridge before crossing it. I followed her inside. Her place looked half-finished. Books and stacks, frames still wrapped. A blue tank catching lamplight against denim. A gold pendant at her collarbone. A watch loose on her wrist. The room had that quiet new houses carry, as if it's listening. She set 2 cups on the table and let out a breath I felt across the wood. We talked about ordinary things. Trash pickup. The neighbor who trims hedges with military precision. The best diner for pie after 10. Her voice warmed as she spoke, and mine surprised me by matching it. I noticed flour dust on the counter and asked if she baked. She nodded, then looked away, and the air shifted. "You ever move to get small?" she asked. "Not big or smaller, so no one can find leverage." I said I'd move to get quiet. She gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's when I knew coffee wasn't the point. Safety was. Her shoulders relaxed when the talk stayed gentle. They tightened whenever it drifted toward why she'd left her last city. I didn't pry. The older I get, the more I trust what people don't say. Rain ticked the windows. She said she handled accounts for a clinic part-time for now. She likes systems that balance. She said it as if chaos had charged her interest for years. I told her about inventory routes, forklifts that sing when bearings are right, the pride of things lining up. Felt like 2 tired people handing each other tools. The coffee cooled. A laugh hung between us and didn't fall. She looked at my hands, then at the doorway, and something flickered across her face. Calculation, maybe, or memory. "Thanks for coming," she said, as if hospitality were a risk. It's easier when someone else is breathing in the room. That should have been the end. Grateful coffee, rain, 2 neighbors returning to separate routines. Instead, the knob turned. The door opened. A tall man stepped in, bringing the smell of wind with him. His shirt was dry. He'd been close, waiting. Sophie Ellis stood so fast her chair scraped. Color left her face, then rushed back. His gaze slid to me, quick and narrow, like checking a price tag. He smiled without kindness and said, "I wondered who was keeping you busy." My grip tightened around the mug. I didn't rise. Sophie Ellis's hand trembled once and then steadied. She said his name like a verdict. Lucas Bennett. There. Lucas Bennett's name hung in the air like smoke you couldn't wave away. He didn't glance at Sophie Ellis again. His eyes stayed on me, weighing, dismissing, daring. I set the mug down carefully because in that moment, even the smallest sound might break something. Sophie Ellis recovered faster than I did. She crossed her arms, the pendant at her throat catching the lamp's glow, and said, "You can't just walk in anymore." Her voice was steady, but I saw the tremor in her shoulders. Lucas Bennett leaned against the doorframe as though he had every right. Tall, athletic, the kind of man who wore confidence like armor. "Funny," he said. "You never minded before." Then his gaze shifted back to me. Deliberate. "What is this?" A neighborly favor. I could have answered 100 ways. I could have introduced myself like we were at a barbecue. I could have ignored him altogether. Instead, I said nothing. Silence sometimes speaks louder, and he didn't like it. His jaw tightened. Sophie Ellis stepped between us, though neither of us had moved. Lucas Bennett, you should go. I left something here, he said, and you owe me a conversation. His eyes returned to me. Unless you've got a new hobby, Sophie Ellis stung, though I told myself it shouldn't. I was just a man having coffee with a neighbor. Except I wasn't. Not really. Lucas Bennett's presence made that plain. He eventually left, slamming the door hard enough to shake the cups on the table. The sound echoed long after his footsteps faded. Sophie Ellis exhaled, rubbed her temple, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "You don't owe me an apology." "Yes, I do," she said, "because he'll be back. He always comes back." That night, I walked home through puddles that reflected the dim street lamps. My house felt smaller than usual. I kept replaying the look in her eyes. Not fear exactly, not love either, but something that bound me to her story before I knew the whole of it. The next days confirmed it. Lucas Bennett lingered around the block. His car parked too long, his shadow too near, and the neighborhood noticed. Margaret Cole, the retired school teacher with binoculars for eyes, cornered me while I trimmed my hedges. "He's trouble," she whispered like it was gospel. "Men like him don't just fade away. You be careful, Ethan Wright." I nodded, though I didn't know what careful meant anymore. Careful would have been declining her invitation for coffee. Careful would have been pretending her smile didn't pull at me, but it was too late for careful. I found myself stopping by her porch more often. Sometimes I brought groceries, sometimes just silence, which she seemed to need. She'd sit on the steps, denim brushing against her skin, glasses catching the sun, and tell me pieces of her past like fragments of glass. "He wasn't always cruel," she said once. "He knew how to fill a room, how to make people believe." She paused. That was the trap. I believed too long. I didn't ask what broke it. Some answers don't heal. One evening, she laughed suddenly, catching me off guard. "Look at us," she said. "Two grown-ups hiding out from the world with coffee cups. My mother would say we're wasting time." I told her it didn't feel wasted. She looked at me then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between us. Something fragile and dangerous. But Lucas Bennett wasn't done. I saw him again one Saturday, leaning against his car outside her driveway. He smirked as I approached. "Enjoying your charity work?" he asked. I kept walking, but his words followed me. Inside, Sophie Ellis was pacing. "He won't stop," she said. "He'll try to win the story back. That's what he does. He makes people think I'm the villain." And maybe that was the moment I understood what she feared most. Not fists, not fights. Reputation. The weight of whispers, the way people pick sides. Later, as I left her house, I caught sight of Margaret Cole peeking again. Her eyes narrowed, and I realized she'd already chosen what story to believe. That night, I lay awake. Lucas Bennett's smirk, Sophie Ellis's voice. The pressure of a neighborhood where secrets traveled faster than rain. I thought about leaving it alone, stepping back before it went further. But the truth was I already couldn't. I was in it now, and Lucas Bennett knew it too. The neighborhood has its own rhythm, and lately mine was out of tune. Every glance felt weighted. Every wave from a neighbor carried more questions than kindness. Whispers float in places like ours, at the grocery line, on the church steps by the mailboxes. And Lucas Bennett was feeding those whispers. I noticed it at the diner. Old friends who used to greet me with easy warmth now offered clipped nods. One even muttered, "Careful who you get mixed up with." That's when I understood Lucas Bennett's game. He was painting me as the intruder, the opportunist who swooped in on a fragile woman. Sophie Ellis felt it too. One afternoon, she invited me in with a tired smile. Her apartment was tidier than before, as if order might defend her. She poured tea instead of coffee, maybe to change the script. "He's talking," she said simply. I sat across from her, watching the steam curl between us. "Let him. People believe what they want." She shook her head. "Not when he's charming. He makes his story sound like scripture." She rubbed her wrist absent-mindedly, and I noticed the mark where her watch usually Saturday. He knows how to twist. I wanted to reach across the table, but I stayed still. Distance was safer, even as my heart leaned toward her. That evening, as I left, Lucas Bennett was waiting by my truck. He stepped forward, blocking my door. "You think you're her hero?" His voice was low, edged with amusement that wasn't friendly. "You don't know half of it. She'll drag you down same way she did me." I didn't answer, and silence worked again. It made him fill the space. He leaned closer. "She's not what you think. She'll smile. She'll pour you tea. But one day you'll wake up and realize you're the fool who carried her baggage." He finally stepped back, satisfied with his own words. And I drove off, but his voice stayed. The next day, I found Sophie Ellis in her kitchen, sunlight streaking across her glasses. She was baking, flour on her cheek, cinnamon in the air. She looked younger when she laughed at herself for the mess. "Don't tell anyone," she teased. "I'm better with numbers than recipes." I couldn't help but smile. For a moment, the world shrank to just us, and it felt almost normal. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, went pale, and silenced it. "Lucas Bennett?" I asked. She nodded. "He doesn't give up. He thinks persistence is love. He doesn't understand its control." I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone anymore, that I'd stand there no matter how heavy it got. But words like that carry weight. And once spoken, they change everything. So, I stayed quiet, offering presents instead of promises. Later that week, Margaret Cole stopped me again while I mowed the lawn. "I've known Lucas Bennett since he was a boy," she said, her voice sharp. "He's not perfect, but he's family here. You're not. Be careful who you cross." Her words weren't a warning. They were a verdict. That night, Sophie Ellis called. Her voice trembled through the phone. "He came by. He left flowers. He used to do that when things were bad. It's not kindness. It's a message." I told her I was coming over. When I arrived, she was on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. The bouquet sat on the step, bright against the dark wood. Roses, perfect, poisonous. She looked at me with eyes that carried both fear and defiance. "Do you think I'm making a mistake? Letting you in? Letting this get complicated?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was tangled. Yes, it was a mistake. Dangerous, messy, bound to stir trouble. But as I looked at her, at the way the porch light softened her face, I knew I couldn't step back. "If it's a mistake," I said finally, "it's one I'm already in," she exhaled. A sound somewhere between relief and sorrow. The night was quiet except for the crickets. But I knew, and she knew, that quiet never lasts. Somewhere in the dark, Lucas Bennett was waiting for his turn again. I should have expected the storm, but I didn't. It came on a Thursday evening when the air was heavy and the sky turned the color of old bruises. I just closed up at work when Sophie Ellis called. Her voice was tight, almost breathless. "He's here," she whispered. "Lucas Bennett, he won't leave." By the time I reached her street, rain had started. Lucas Bennett's car was already there, crooked across her driveway. I parked a few houses down and walked the rest of the way, the water plastering my shirt to my skin. Through the window, I saw them. Sophie Ellis by the counter, arms folded like a shield, and Lucas Bennett pacing like a caged animal. His voice carried even through the glass. Accusations strung together like barbed wire. I knocked once, then stepped inside. Lucas Bennett froze mid-sentence. Sophie Ellis's eyes snapped to mine wide with both relief and dread. "You again," Lucas Bennett said, his voice dripping with scorn. "The hero neighbor. What is it you think you're saving her from?" I closed the door slowly, keeping my eyes on him. "I'm here because she asked me to be." Sophie Ellis didn't speak, but her silence was its own confirmation. Lucas Bennett laughed short, humorless. "She's good at this. She draws men in, makes them believe they're different." I believed it once, too. Sophie Ellis's voice cracked then, low but firm. "No, Lucas Bennett, you believed you owned me. That's not the same." The words cut the air like glass. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. His jaw worked. His fists opened and closed. Then he turned to me. "You think you know her? You don't. She'll bleed you dry." I felt my pulse hammering, but I kept my voice calm. Maybe, but that's my choice, not yours. The rain outside beat harder. A drum roll to the silence inside. Lucas Bennett finally spat out, "You'll regret this," and stormed past me. The door slammed so hard the light above flickered. Sophie Ellis slumped against the counter, covering her face with her hands. I moved closer, but didn't touch her. Not yet. She needed space to breathe. When she finally lowered her hands, her eyes were rimmed red. "I hate that he can still do this," she whispered. "Walk in, tear the air apart, and leave me shaking. You don't have to face him alone anymore," I said softly. For the first time, she let me place my hand over hers. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a line drawn, a quiet vow. The next days were tense. Lucas Bennett didn't come back right away, but his shadow lingered. His car parked at odd hours, his name slipping into conversations around the block. People were picking sides whether they admitted it or not. Some nodded at me with approval, others with suspicion. Even at work, I caught myself distracted, replaying every moment, every word. I wasn't just the neighbor anymore. I was part of her fight. One evening, Sophie Ellis invited me over again. The storm had passed, and her kitchen smelled of fresh bread. We sat close, the table between us cluttered with mugs and crumbs. She pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose, then looked at me with something raw in her eyes. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice trembled, but not from fear this time, from resolve. "I stayed with him longer than I should have because I thought I didn't deserve better. He told me no one else would want me, and I believed it. I wanted to interrupt, to deny every cruel word, but I let her speak. I don't know if I'm ready for this," she gestured between us, "but I do know I feel safer when you're near, and that matters more than I thought it would." Her confession sat between us like a fragile gift. I reached across the table, this time without hesitation, and she didn't pull away. The room was quiet, except for the ticking of her clock. I realized then that this wasn't about winning or losing against Lucas Bennett. It wasn't even about the gossip of the neighborhood. It was about the two of us choosing whether to step forward or retreat. I squeezed her hand gently. She let out a shaky laugh, then whispered, "Maybe coffee isn't such a bad idea after all." But I knew it wasn't coffee that tied me to her. It was the way she let me see the fractures and the fight beneath her calm surface. And for the first time in years, I felt like staying wasn't just a choice. It was where I belonged. The neighborhood felt different after that night, though maybe it was just me who had changed. Every morning when I stepped outside, I caught myself scanning the street for Lucas Bennett's car. Some days it was there, some days not. But even when it wasn't, his presence hung over us like a storm cloud, refusing to drift away. Sophie Ellis and I grew closer in those days, not with grand gestures, but with small, ordinary things that mattered more than either of us admitted. She started leaving her porch light on when she knew I'd be walking home late. I found myself bringing her bread from the bakery near my job just because I knew she liked it toasted with honey. We were building something fragile and quiet brick by brick, though neither of us dared to call it love yet. But Lucas Bennett wasn't finished. It was a Sunday afternoon when he showed up again. I was in her kitchen fixing the loose handle on one of her drawers when we heard the sharp knock. Sophie Ellis stiffened immediately. She didn't have to say his name. I already knew. I opened the door before she could stop me. Lucas Bennett stood there, his eyes narrowing when he saw me. His smile was thin, dangerous. "Of course," he said. "The handyman neighbor always here." I stepped outside, pulling the door nearly shut behind me. "What do you want, Lucas Bennett?" He spread his arms like the question amused him. "I want what's mine. She doesn't know what she's doing. You think this?" He waved vaguely toward the door. "Is real? You'll get bored. She'll get restless. And then what? She'll come crawling back like she always does." "She won't," I said simply. Something shifted in his face. Then a flash of anger breaking through the mask. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You don't get it. I made her who she is. Without me, she's nothing. I didn't raise my voice. That's where you're wrong. Without you, she's finally herself." His jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might swing. But then Sophie Ellis's voice cut through the air behind us. Enough, Lucas Bennett. She had opened the door, standing tall despite the fear I knew churned inside her. Her glasses caught the afternoon sun, her pendant glinting like a shield. I'm not yours. Not now. Not ever again. Lucas Bennett's shoulders tightened. He looked between us, his pride wearing with the truth in her voice. Finally, with a bitter laugh, he turned away. You'll regret this, he muttered, echoing the same words he'd thrown at me before. Then he was gone. Silence settled on the street. I turned to Sophie Ellis, but she was already wiping at her eyes, half angry with herself for letting him shake her again. I stepped closer, not with promises I couldn't keep, but with steadiness. She leaned into me, just enough to let me know she was choosing trust. Inch by inch, that night we sat on her porch with mugs of tea. The street quiet except for the hum of crickets. The weight of what had happened pressed down. But there was also relief, a sense that a page had finally turned. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, Sophie Ellis admitted softly. People will still talk. Lucas Bennett won't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I don't feel like I'm standing alone. I looked at her, at the way the porch light framed her face, and realized that was all either of us wanted. Not perfection, not a fairy tale, just someone to share the burden with. Then we'll face it together, I said. Her hand found mine on the armrest, fingers tentative at first, then firm. A quiet choice, but powerful. The neighborhood would still gossip. Lucas Bennett's shadow might linger. Life would never be simple. But as we sat there side by side, I knew one thing for certain. She hadn't just invited me in for coffee that day. She had opened a door neither of us planned to close again. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving routines. I was beginning something,